What happens when a legendary martial artist sits down for what should be a simple morning talk show interview, only to face disrespect so extreme that he's forced to do something he's never done before on live television? It only took one comment, one final crossing of the line, for Joy Behar to push Chuck Norris too far, sparking a walkout that left the entire studio in stunned silence. The View studio was packed that morning. The audience filled every seat, cameras were rolling, and the energy was high. Chuck Norris, the man who needed no introduction, sat on the couch, looking relaxed in his signature jeans and button-up shirt. He'd come on the show to talk about his new fitness program for kids, a passion project aimed at helping young people stay active and healthy. It was supposed to be lighthearted, easy, fun, but from the moment the camera started rolling, something felt off. Joy Behar sat across from Chuck with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. The other hosts were there too, but Joy had made it clear she was leading this segment. She shuffled her note cards and leaned forward with that look she gets when she thinks she's about to say something clever. "So Chuck," she began, her voice dripping with a tone that immediately put everyone on edge. "You're here to talk about fitness for kids. That's nice. But let's be honest, don't you think your whole tough guy image is a little outdated? I mean, we're trying to teach kids about cooperation and feelings these days, not all this macho stuff." The audience went quiet. You could feel the tension rise in the room, like someone had just turned up the heat. Chuck's expression didn't change. He smiled politely, the way someone does when they're choosing to take the high road. "Well, Joy, respect and discipline are timeless values," Chuck said calmly. "Teaching kids to be strong, both physically and mentally, isn't about being macho. It's about giving them confidence and self-respect. That's what martial arts taught me, and that's what I want to pass on." It was a perfect answer. Gracious, clear, and impossible to argue with. Any reasonable host would have nodded and moved on. But Joy wasn't done. She waved her hand dismissively, like she was swatting away his words. "Oh please, strong? Kids today don't need to learn how to fight. They need to learn how to express themselves, how to be sensitive. All this karate stuff is just violence dressed up as exercise." Chuck's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed even. "Martial arts isn't about violence, Joy. It's about self-control. It's about teaching kids to walk away from fights, not start them. Maybe if more kids learned discipline, we'd have fewer problems." "Discipline," Joy repeated, saying the word like it tasted bad. "That's just another word for telling kids what to do. Let me ask you something, Chuck. Do you really think your generation's way of doing things was so great? Because from where I'm sitting, you guys created a lot of the problems we're dealing with now." The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. One of them tried to jump in to redirect the conversation, but Joy kept going. "I mean, come on. You made all those action movies where you just punched and kicked your way through problems? What kind of message is that? Violence solves everything?" Chuck took a slow breath. You could see him counting to 10 in his head. "Joy, those were movies, fiction, entertainment. And if you actually watched them, you'd see the message was always about standing up for what's right, protecting people who can't protect themselves. But this isn't about movies. This is about helping kids develop healthy habits." "Healthy habits," Joy said with a smirk. "Is that what we're calling it? Look, I'll be straight with you. I think this whole thing is just you trying to stay relevant. You had your moment back in the 80s and 90s. And now you're trying to cash in on nostalgia." The audience gasped. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for the microphones to pick up. The other host looked horrified. This had crossed a line, and everyone knew it. Chuck sat perfectly still. His face was calm, but you could see something change in his eyes. He'd been patient. He'd been respectful. He'd tried to keep things civil, but there's only so much disrespect a man can take. "Joy," he said quietly, "I didn't come here to be insulted. I came here to talk about helping children. If you're not interested in having that conversation respectfully, then maybe I shouldn't be here." It was a warning. A clear, final warning. Any host with an ounce of sense would have backed off, apologized, changed course. But Joy Behar wasn't any host. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, don't be so sensitive, Chuck. I'm just asking the tough questions. Isn't that what journalism is? Or do you only like it when people treat you like some kind of hero?" "Tough questions are fine," Chuck replied, his voice still controlled but with an edge now. "But there's a difference between tough questions and disrespect. You're not interested in understanding what I do or why I do it. You just want to tear it down. Maybe because it deserves to be torn down," Joy shot back. "This whole alpha male tough guy persona you've built your career on, it's toxic. And now you want to teach that to kids? "No, thank you." The studio went dead silent. Even the cameras seemed to stop moving. The other hosts looked like they wanted to crawl under the table. The audience didn't know whether to gasp again or start booing. Chuck Norris stood up, not quickly, not dramatically. He just calmly, deliberately stood up from the couch. He looked at Joy with an expression that was somehow both disappointed and dignified. "I've spent my entire life trying to help people," Chuck said, his voice quiet but firm. "I've taught thousands of kids martial arts, not to make them violent, but to give them confidence and direction. I've worked with at-risk youth, with kids who had nothing and no one believing in them. And I've never, not once, asked for special treatment or praise. I do it because it matters." He paused, letting his words sink in. Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Chuck held up a hand. "You can disagree with me, Joy. You can think my methods are old-fashioned. That's your right. But you don't get to question my motives or disrespect the work I've dedicated my life to. I came here in good faith, and you've made it clear that was a mistake." Joy's face went red. She wasn't used to being called out like this, especially not on her own show. "Oh, so you're just gonna run away? Can't handle a little criticism?" "Criticism is fine," Chuck said simply. "This isn't criticism. This is hostility, and I don't have to sit here and take it." He looked at the camera, then at the audience. "I'm sorry you all came here expecting a conversation. I was looking forward to one too, but I won't be disrespected on national television. I've got too much self-respect for that." And then Chuck Norris did something that shocked everyone in that studio. He unclipped his microphone, set it gently on the coffee table, and walked off the set, just like that. No yelling, no scene. He simply left. The audience sat frozen. The cameras kept rolling, not sure what else to do. The other hosts looked at Joy with expressions that ranged from shock to barely concealed anger. One of them whispered, "Joy, what did you do?" But the microphones caught it. Joy, for once in her life, seemed at a loss for words. She tried to laugh it off, tried to make a joke about Chuck being too sensitive, but her voice cracked. No one was laughing with her. The audience stayed silent. Even the crew, usually invisible behind the cameras, seemed to be judging her. "Well," Joy said, attempting to regain control, "I guess some people can dish it out but can't take it." But everyone watching knew that wasn't true. They'd all seen what happened. They'd heard Joy's comments, her dismissive attitude, her personal attacks, and they'd seen Chuck Norris, a man known for his toughness, respond with nothing but dignity and self-respect. One of the other hosts finally spoke up, trying to salvage the situation. "We should probably take a break," she said, her voice tight. "When we come back, we'll talk about something else." As they cut to commercial, Joy sat there looking flustered and defensive. She started to say something to the other hosts, but they'd already turned away from her. The energy in the studio had completely shifted. What was supposed to be a fun morning show had turned into something else entirely, something uncomfortable and awkward. Backstage, Chuck Norris was already heading for the exit. Members of the crew approached him, apologizing, telling him they thought Joy had been completely out of line. Chuck was gracious to all of them, shaking hands, thanking them for their professionalism. He held no anger toward them. They were just doing their jobs. But he was done. He'd drawn his line, and he'd stuck to it. Back in the studio, as the commercial break continued, Joy tried to regroup. She checked her makeup, shuffled her papers, and attempted to put on her game face. But everyone around her could see she was rattled. She'd pushed too hard, and it had backfired spectacularly. One of the producers came over, looking stressed. There was a hurried conversation, lots of hand gestures, worried expressions. The audience could see all of it happening, even though they couldn't hear the words. Whatever was being said, it was clear Joy was being told she'd messed up. When the show came back from commercial, Joy's tone had completely changed. She was subdued, less cocky. She tried to move on to the next segment, but there was no energy behind it. The other hosts did their best to carry the show, but the damage was done. The audience knew what they'd witnessed. They'd seen a legendary figure treated with shocking disrespect. They'd seen him try, repeatedly, to keep things civil and professional. And they'd seen him finally decide he'd had enough. Chuck Norris didn't need the view. He didn't need the platform or the exposure. He'd been doing his work, helping kids, teaching martial arts, making a difference, long before this interview, and he'd continue long after. But the View needed guests who were willing to come on and be treated fairly. And after this incident, a lot of people would be thinking twice about sitting on that couch. What made Chuck's walkout so powerful wasn't anger or drama. It was the quiet dignity of it. He didn't yell or make threats. He didn't insult Joy back or try to get revenge. He simply said, "I don't have to accept this treatment," and left. In doing so, he showed more strength than any martial arts move ever could. The footage of the walkout spread like wildfire. People couldn't stop talking about it. They replayed Joy's comments, Chuck's responses, and that moment when he stood up and took off his microphone, it became one of those television moments that people remember, not because of spectacle, but because of principle. Joy had tried to paint Chuck as outdated, as irrelevant, as someone clinging to the past. But in that moment, Chuck showed exactly why the values he teaches, respect, self-control, dignity, never go out of style. He could have stayed and fought. He could have raised his voice, could have matched Joy's hostility with his own, but he chose the harder path. He chose to walk away with his head held high. The audience in that studio sat in silence for the rest of the show. They weren't entertained anymore. They were uncomfortable, watching what felt like a train wreck in slow motion. Many of them had come hoping to see Chuck Norris, excited to hear about his new program, eager to maybe get a photo after the show. Instead, they witnessed a masterclass in how not to treat a guest. As the show finally ended and the audience filed out, the conversations were all the same. "I can't believe she said that. He was so respectful, and she just kept attacking him." Good for him for leaving. Not one person defended Joy's behavior. Not one person thought Chuck had overreacted. In television, certain moments define careers. For Chuck Norris, this was a moment that reminded everyone why he'd been respected for so many years. Not because he could kick higher or punch harder than anyone else, but because he knew who he was and what he stood for. He didn't need to prove anything to Joy Behar or anyone else. He was secure enough in himself to walk away from disrespect. For Joy, this was a moment that revealed something important. For all her talk about asking tough questions and speaking truth to power, she couldn't handle someone calmly standing up to her. She'd expected Chuck to sit there and take it, to laugh off her insults, to play along with her game. When he refused, when he simply said, "No, I won't accept this," she had no response. The walk-off became legendary, not because Chuck Norris did something shocking or out of character. It became legendary because he did exactly what anyone with self-respect should do when faced with that kind of treatment. He left. He didn't make a scene. He didn't try to hurt anyone. He just decided his time and his dignity were worth more than whatever this interview had become. And in that quiet moment, standing up and walking away, Chuck Norris taught a more valuable lesson than any fitness program ever could. He taught that it's okay to remove yourself from toxic situations. That respect is a two-way street. That being the bigger person doesn't mean accepting abuse. It means knowing your worth and not letting anyone diminish it. The studio crew would talk about that day for years. They'd seen plenty of awkward interviews, plenty of tense moments, but they'd never seen anything quite like this. They'd never seen a guest handle disrespect with such grace. They'd never seen someone walk off a set and somehow come out looking better for it. Joy tried to spin it later, tried to claim it was all overblown, that Chuck had been too sensitive. But the footage didn't lie. Anyone could watch it and see exactly what happened. They could hear the dismissive comments, the personal attacks, the refusal to let Chuck talk about what he came to discuss. They could see him trying, over and over, to bring the conversation back to something productive. And they could see the moment when he realized it was pointless. That's the thing about dignity. You can't fake it, and you can't take it from someone who truly has it. Joy had tried to embarrass Chuck, to make him look foolish or outdated. Instead, she'd given him an opportunity to show the world exactly what he was made of. And what he was made of was stronger than any insult she could throw. The lesson from that day was simple but profound. You don't have to engage with people who don't respect you. You don't have to sit there and take abuse just because someone has a microphone and a platform. You can stand up, literally stand up, and walk away. And sometimes, that's the strongest thing you can do. Chuck Norris walked onto that set as a legend. He walked off as something more. He walked off as a reminder that real strength isn't about fighting. It's about knowing when to fight and when to simply refuse to participate. Joy Behar thought she was in control that day. She thought she could provoke and prod and push. But Chuck showed her something important. You can't control someone who respects themselves too much to play your games. The empty seat where Chuck had been sitting said everything. It was a statement without words. It was a line drawn in the sand. It said, "This far and no further." And everyone watching understood it perfectly. In the end, that morning on The View became about much more than a fitness program or a celebrity interview. It became about character, about what happens when someone with real principles meets someone who values confrontation over conversation. about the power of simply saying no and meaning it. Chuck Norris didn't need to throw a punch to win that day. He didn't need to raise his voice or make threats. All he needed to do was stand up, take off his microphone, and walk out that door. In doing so, he reminded everyone watching that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't deserve your time or your energy. The lights in the studio eventually dimmed. The audience went home. The camera stopped rolling. But that moment, that quiet, powerful moment when Chuck Norris chose dignity over drama, when he chose self-respect over spectacle, that moment would last forever. Because that's what real strength looks like. Not loud, not aggressive, just certain, just unshakable, just done.